All right, we're recording.
Okay.
All right, we're in James. Now, somebody's asked this question, so I think everybody's on here heard this too, that we'll have the midterm next Tuesday. So I messed up on the syllabus, but it'll be next Tuesday. Now, if you missed a class, then go back and watch that class. It's on my YouTube page too. So,
So is our granddaughter now.
yes.
Yeah, I already started. Yes, okay. I will do.
All right, now this is a continuation then of James chapter 2.
Chapter 3.
Yeah, we are in James chapter 3, but this is a continuation then of a thought that he is there, the theme then that he's talking about words are worthless without acts. And let me give you an kind of an introduction to this. He's dealing with Christians living, what Christian living is all about, okay? And he will show the importance of the tongue in this case, controlling the tongue. And who hasn't had a problem with his tongue in the past? Or who, even better yet, who hasn't have a problem with their tongue in the now, in the present?
Amen.
All right. Is there anybody who hadn't let their tongue get them in a tight spot? All right. The tongue is a really wet place. I like this. And it's really easy for it to slip. And if there are two things that pose real problems for all men, it is thoughts and tongues, minds and mouth. Many are our own words we've had to eat. That's why Colossians 4:6 tells us to season them with salt. Because if we don't season them with salt, it's really hard to swallow them down. Okay. James already mentioned the tongue in James chapter 1, verses 19 through 26. And in James chapter 2, he's dealt with the worthlessness of saying without showing. So he's dealt with the tongue there too. Here in this chapter, in James chapter 2, he dealt with works being important. In this one, he's going to do with words are also important. So there's kind of an introduction to this chapter. All right, now in the King James, verse 1 says, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that ye shall receive the greater condemnation." Now the New King James has, "My brethren, let not many things of you be, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that ye shall receive a stricter judgment." And so that's really what he's talking about in this. Here is then teachers, masters, in the King James is reference to teachers. And we need to be careful. I want you to read some passages too about the tongue. Matthew chapter 12, verses 34 through 37. Matthew 12, 34 through 27. "O generation of vipers, can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasures of heart bringeth forth good things, and evil man out of the evil treasures bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." Then also in Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 19. We find in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lip is wise. And then also Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 23. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. So that's pretty good what we're talking about here then this evening. The words of a teacher need to mean something. And they mean less without action. Teachers must be prepared to teach. That's why a lot of times when I try to do something and ask you all to do something, I try to do it too. That's like in the last class of evangelism. We baptized somebody Wednesday night, but trying to study with them. And then trying to get a study with somebody else. Here is then the teacher needs to be showing the way and those type of things. So then a teacher must be prepared to teach. Okay, the influence of a teacher is it's high, okay? You've got probably teachers that you think highly of. I have teachers that I really appreciated and think highly of. Here, teaching then for notoriety, not just because they can teach. Okay. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 5 through 11. Now, the end of the commandment is charity, and out of a pure heart, and of a good conscience, and of faith unfeigned, from which some have swerved, having turned aside from vain jagglings, desiring to be teachers of the law, and understanding neither what they say nor whereof they affirm. And we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly, for the sinner, for the unholy and the profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, for manstealers, for liars, for perjured persons. And if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God, which is committed to my trust. So, then also in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12, beginning it says, for the time you ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongs to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So here is the admonition for teachers then. Not all can be teachers. You know, there is a place, and everybody has a place. If we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 14, and then continuing.
What was that?
1 Corinthians chapter 12.
Okay.
All right, beginning with verse 14. Here is the body then, and the body has different members. Well, not every member does the same thing. We do different functions. The body parts have different functions. And so we need to understand that, but we need to also understand 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15, but sanctify the Lord God in your heart, to be ready always to give an answer, the reason, the hope that lieth within you with meekness and fear. So we maybe not be the best teacher, but we need to understand if somebody asks us, we need to know how to answer them. And sometimes an answer is come to see. We don't necessarily need to give them an answer directly. Sometimes we need to sit down with an open Bible and study with them why we're doing what we're doing. 1 Timothy chapter 4, beginning with verse 13. He says, till I come, till I come, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Neglect not the gift that is in thee, which was given thee by the prophecy and with the laying on of hands of the presbyter. Meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. Take heed to thyself and to thy doctrine. Continue in them, for doing this thou shalt save thyself and them that hear thee. So, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, also, the things thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. I think there's a way that we can be teachers. All of us can be teachers, but understand, sometimes our life is teaching others. You know, if we ask people to come to our worship, then we are being teachers. When we partake of the Lord's Supper, understand we are proclaiming the Lord's death till he comes. So that proclamation there is a teaching. So we are to be teaching in this case. Jesus.
Songs and hymns and
Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. We're teaching. Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. We're teaching and admonishing one another with those too. So there's those ways. All right, Jesus was a teacher, and that's mentioned some 45 times of him being. Brethren, as we look at it, and he says, my brethren, is used to denote how he felt towards them and how we should feel towards one another. There is no caste system in the church. There's nobody greater than anybody else. We're all on equal ground. The teacher, though, has more responsibility because of what he's teaching. He needs to know what he's teaching. And therefore, he has more responsibility and more is required of him. We must be careful not only what we teach, but how we teach. And today, many are not wanting the responsibility of teaching. If you're a part of a Bible school program, how hard is it to get other people to teach?
they don't want to have to do the preparation.
They don't want to. Yeah. They don't want to take the time that it takes to prepare to study,
Especially
to be able
small
to teach.
children. You got to study the lesson and make the little things to get their attention.
Yes. What are the?
Like bulletin boards
Yeah,
and,
but,
and the audio visuals.
The video. Yeah, the visuals. All right. Elders need to be apt to teach. And I know that applies to all of us too. Preachers need to be apt to teach. Bible class teacher. And if you look at they're getting fewer and fewer because many are not wanting to take the time to study. Not only to know the material, but also how to teach others. That's just as important. Mm-hmm. To know how to teach. That's like in our Bible, what we're talking about in our evangelism class, to know how to teach is so important. You know, when we got to start with a certain area talking about Bible authority. Well, we do that because later on we may run into some problems. So you deal with that. There's a certain way you do certain things. You ask people, what did you do in order to be saved? When were you saved? Those questions. That's part of learning how to then do that. It's also like this.
I think people are afraid of failure.
And I think so. I think that's why some people didn't take that evangelism class, because they were afraid of failure. And some people don't want to teach because they're afraid they'll fail. But
you make mistakes.
Yeah, we'd all make mistakes. Sometimes I feel better, and that helps. But also,
study Peter, you'll know what.
But we need to know our material. The better we know the material, the better off we are.
Put Moses on the ark.
That's right, we do. And Judy said sometimes we put Moses on the ark, and I preached a whole sermon. had Moses on the ark. Okay. And it was Noah. Okay. So for the church to function, though, the church needs and must have teachers, and more than one teacher. The elders, the teachers, and the preachers are all important. And for the church to function, they need more than one of those people.
If you think about to your school system, that your public school system, you've got your teachers, you've got your assistants, you got your secretaries, you got your principals, you got all.
Right.
Not everybody can be the leader. Not everybody can be but everybody none need to be the janitor.
That's
either.
right. Everybody's got a responsibility. That's the body. That's what we're talking about. All right. Understand then that if we have the ability and do not use that ability,
God will hold us.
then we are held responsible too for not using what God has given us. That's the parable then in Matthew chapter 25. Well, it's not a parable, but it's a judgment scene there. When he's given you have the 5 talented man, the 2 talented man, and the 1 talented man, he gave to them according to their ability. Now, when we, understand that is the talent has to deal with money. But he talks about in there, he gave to every man according to his ability. Now, not everybody has the same ability. Not everybody is a great gospel preacher. Not everybody is a great song leader. Not everybody is a great prayer.
Well,
But
public prayers.
yeah, but everybody needs to, all the men need to know how to do those things, because there may be a time when they need to do those things. They may be the only man in the congregation. So that's on a Sunday, on any given Sunday. So if that's the case, he needs to be able to say, okay, I can do this. I may not be the best, but I can do this. So, the 1 talented man was the one who did nothing. And don't say I'm just a 1 talented person, be a 2, but don't say I'm a 1 talent, because he did nothing. And that's not what God wants out of us. All right. So verse number 2.
This is going to answer about we all fail. We all come short.
Yeah. All right. Let me get back to James chapter 3 and this one. All right. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and also able to bridle the whole body. And then the New King James says, for we all stumble.
So does the bystander.
In many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man and also able to bridle the whole body. Okay. So to stumble is to fall or trip. Okay. We make mistakes, and especially in the use of tongues. If you don't make mistakes with the use of your tongues, you're not saying anything. And I could ask all you husbands, have you ever made a mistake talking to your wife? And I guarantee you have.
Does this dress make me fat?
If she comes up there and asks, and that's a good point. Judy said, does this dress make me look fat? Now, how are you going to answer it?
The beautiful color on you, Jim.
Okay. You got to be careful. Like, have you quit beating your wife? There's some questions that, you just, not say anything. Okay. So
Take it.
James is including himself in this attribute. The way he, we then, so he's inclusive in this. 1 John chapter 1, verses 7 through 9. It says, if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanseth us from all our sins. But if we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. This stumbling that we're talking about is not deliberate. Stumbling is what we say.
Because what pops up outside.
Yeah.
Pops up.
And sometimes we do that often, okay?
Open mouth before an insert foot.
but he is not sinless, but he is mature. And that's what we're talking about. He has self-control. And if we could ever learn that perfectly, we'd be better off to control our words and our thoughts and those things. Greater
He
effort.
said he was not sinless, but he's
Mature.
mature. Okay.
He has self-control. That's maturity, when you know how to control yourself on those things. Greater effort is needed to control the tongue more than any other member of the body. Now, if we go back to James chapter 1, verse 26, he says, if any man among you seems to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, he deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. So what proceeds out of your mouth, you can tell what's in his heart. And see, that's why Matthew chapter 12 that we talked about, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So we need to be careful what's in our heart. Well, understand we're talking about our mind there. So what's in it? What are we filling our mind with? That's what will be coming out of. Now, he's going to use two illustrations in this to illustrate his point. Number one, we find in verse 3, behold, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Now, the bridle then is this first illustration. And I'm thinking of more like the working class horse. Here's Clydesdale. I don't know what the other names are, but I know there's a working class, and they are huge horses.
Percheron.
I mean, they're taller than I am at their shoulders, and I know they measure in my hands. But I mean, these animals.
The Percheron, I can walk up.
Yeah, they are huge. But and really, if you take this, the illustration is true. Doesn't matter if it's a Shetland pony or it's one of those big horses, but we put this bit in their mouth and we control them. It doesn't make any difference. The bit and the size of the horse, there's huge difference there, but we do that to control then the rest of the horse. And the next illustration we find in verse number 4, behold also the ships, which though they be so great and are driven with a fierce wind, yet are they turned with a very small helm whithersoever the governor listeth. So here is the second illustration. James readers would understand both of them. Many in that day would be familiar with the ships because, the proximity of water, the Sea of Galilee, these other things that they had, and they would know about them, also the horses and in the use of horses. So they would use, he used things that they would understand. And here is then this great big ship. And I've been on, well, not a big ship. Well, it's been a big ship. I would call it a big ship, but maybe others would call it not so big a ship. But anyway, and here is the helms then, that we control it with. What is it? It's not called the helms, is it?
Rudder?
Yeah, the rudder. Okay. And
That's the thing on there.
yeah,
that
that's
goes like
the rudder on the back end of it. And it controls them, and they go where they want to.
You control it from the
Yeah.
helm.
Yeah, that's right. But he's using, here is then such a great thing, and here's the little thing that's controlling. Understand that. That's his point out of these two illustrations. And then he says in verse 5, even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. So the tongue is such a little thing, and look how much trouble we can get into with it. Okay? The tongue is powerful, and it's influential. Size has nothing to do with the potential or the power. Goes back. We can trash talk a lot, okay? and the Alabama Georgia thing. Okay, you can trash talk a lot, but the proof then is when you get on the playing field
The
and you
score.
see who can, that's right, the score at the end of the game. All right. We see that a lot in athletics, that they're boasting of what they can do and what, talk's cheap. We can talk big and arrogant and boastful, but that's not what is important. Just because you talk, can you
Back it up.
yeah, can you walk the game? If you talk the game, can you walk the game? And that's important too. So he's going to use then another illustration, and that is of a fire. All right. Now, a fire starts out to be a little thing. I don't care if you're building a fire, or if a house catches fire, whatever takes place, it starts out little. You take your kindling and that type of thing, and you build your fire till it gets big, and you can put the big logs on there. So, it starts out little. And then it grows and it grows and grows. But look what this little fire, as it starts out, look at the damage that can be done. We had a church member's house that burnt on Saturday. And they couldn't put the fire out. And the house burnt to the ground. I mean, there's nothing left but the tin and whatever metal was in the house. All the wood is gone. Okay? It starts out small. And if we don't watch out, it will, we've got to control that fire. Fire can be good, but we've got to control it. And in this case, it can get out of hand real quick. Proverbs chapter 26, beginning with verse 18 and going through verse 25. A madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death. So is a man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, I am not in sport. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceases. As the coals are to a burning coals, and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindling strife. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down to the innermost parts of the belly. That idea that we have this little saying, sticks and stones, but may break my bones, but words shall never. So that's not true. Words hurt, Burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd covereth with silver dross. And he that hateth dissembleth his lips and lieth up deceit with him. When he speaketh fair, believe him not. For there are 7 admonitions in his heart. Yes. So there is then the fire, what it can do. Then let's see, verse number 6, and he's going to talk about that some more, about this little thing that starts. He says, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body. It setteth on fire the course of nature, and it setteth on fire of hell. What he's talking about, what the tongue is, and the improper consequences of its use.
Ephesians 4:29.
I'll get to that. All right, the pain, the destruction, and the anguish starts out small and ends up large. And this is the improper use of the tongue. The world of iniquity that he's talking about here is the sum total of evil. Here's the harm of slander, the harm of profanity, the harm of falsehood, the harm of blasphemy.
Start over with your harms.
The harm of slander, profanity, falsehood,
Okay.
blasphemy, and scandal. All right. All of these start with the tongue. Okay. The improper use of the tongue stains the whole body. Lying affects everything. You know, if you've ever known a person who is a liar, you don't trust them. You don't trust anyone who lies on any level.
That's right.
The improper use, and whether it's a preacher or whoever, you know, the improper use of the tongue influences the entire life of a man. Here is the fires of hell. That's an interesting beginning in the illustration that this would bring to their mind. There's a valley outside of Jerusalem where the children of Israel offered their children to Molech. This is back in the Old Testament. When this
Well, there's a special place for liars.
Yeah, this was where they would use then for a garbage. After they did this and they quit burning their children, then this area was used for a garbage dump.
Oh, wow.
And the fires would never go out.
Oh, wow.
It was continuous burning.
Oh, wow. Like hell.
Yes, because that's why he calls it. And it never went out because the amount of garbage placed there. Sometimes even bodies would be thrown there because of they were
Disease.
poor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a synonym then for the place of future punishment.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, like Gehenna,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Hades is the realm of the departed spirits. Gehenna is for the disobedient. And Sheol is the Old Testament word for Hades.
Hell. Torment.
Yes. A defiled body is only fit for the refuge dump and burned. The tongue can do all of this to an individual. Verse number 7. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. And this is Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27 and 28. Talks about that. Verse 26 talks about, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And then he goes on and says the purpose of man, that he is then,
Man's dominion.
let me get over there and we'll read that. I want to start with verse 26. God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So that's what James has reference to in this passage, then, is how we have reference for those things. Man is superior. And we have people that need to learn this. Man is superior to all the animals and can be used for his benefits. Now, I know there is the abuse of this, but it needs to be used for his benefits. We have dogs that are trained to help man out. We have other animals that are trained to help men. And whatever, maybe disease or detection. We use them for bomb detection. We use them for a lot of different
You can
things.
also
Drugs.
use some of their parts for your body.
Yes. So
Like valves.
there's 4 kinds of animals. There's 4-legged. There's flying. crawling, and fish, and they've all been tamed by mankind. Man can tame these animals, and they can be huge animals. You take like an elephant, how they've trained the elephant, and he can do that. But he cannot then always control himself. And that's the sad thing there. Verse number 8. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Now, man is not excused in the abusive language. We are, and then we mentioned the passage in Matthew chapter 12 there. By thy words thou shalt be justified, by thy words thou shalt be condemned. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, it says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that may minister grace to the hearers. And then I mentioned this also, Colossians chapter 4 and verse number 6, it says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. So here is then, we can and we need to strive, but it is very difficult for us to control this tongue. The tongue, it can never be tamed. It can break loose at any time and any moment. So it must be restrained at all times. And once a word is spoken, it is impossible to bring it back. The effects of the improper use of a tongue is like poison. Some poisons don't kill immediately. It takes a little bit of time. And that is the way it is with the tongue. All right. In verse 9, he talks about the contradictions of the tongue. All right. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. And I'm going to get on a soapbox here. And we need to be careful of what we're listening to on our radios and our vehicles, because some of these songs are ungodly songs.
And they desensitize us to the words.
That's right. It does. We listen to them and maybe we don't pay that close of attention, but it is desensitizing us to whatever's being said. And we need, and I'm going to use country music, and other music can be just as bad.
Rap music.
But they'll talk, and if you go to the concerts, a lot of times they'll sing Amazing Grace, and the next thing they'll talk about drinking and carousing around and fornicating and doing all this kind of other stuff. And you can't, to be consistent, you can't do that. And that's what he's talking about. All right, to bless then is to speak well of the highest use of the tongue, and that's to bless God. To bless God and curse man is not the proper use of the tongue. We mentioned Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. All right, we're made then in the similitude of God. Okay? So why curse man? Why speak evil of God's handiwork, man? And if to do that, then, is to speak evil of God. 1 John chapter 4 verses 20 and 21.
1 John.
1 John chapter 4, verses 20 and 21. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? For this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God loveth also his brother. So here is the habitual practice then of cursing man. Now, I don't understand something when he's using this. We think of cursing as using profanity, but a curse in that time is
like I curse the day you were born.
Yes, it's really making a curse upon them.
May you fall off the end of a ledge.
Something, yeah. May you fall off the end of the ledge. It's something along those lines. All right. A curse is a form of a prayer to God that He may bring evil upon a man. So this image of God then is moral and spiritual. Now notice verse 10. This is what I was talking about with some of our music that we're singing. And I'm talking about not psalms and spiritual songs. I'm thinking, the contemporary. Contemporary. All right, out of the same mouth proceedeth blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. What proceeds out of your mouth? Before we start preaching and teaching these, what comes out of your mouth? Do you ever say anything that you shouldn't say? As a preacher, do you say some things that you shouldn't say? As a member of the church, do you say some things that you shouldn't say? So here's an absurdity then in this verse. The mouth was created for blessings, not cursings. It is inconsistent to praise and curse. It is contrary to nature because it is contradictory.
Makes me think of that dog. Like blah, 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 4-letter words, and then let us pray.
Pray, yeah. All right. Conclusion then, based on this verse, is that it not ought to be so. Now, notice what he says in verse 11. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? So this is a rhetorical question. And no fountain produces both good and bad water at the same time. It's an impossibility. And that's what he's saying. And then he's going to use another illustration in verse number 12. Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain yield both salt and fresh. So here again, then is the illustration. He goes back to verse 11, but he said, here's another rhetorical question. A tree then produces after its kind. Go back to Genesis chapter 1, okay? And that's what God established, that a tree then, and anything that produces after its kind. A pecan tree is going to make pecans. It's not going to make something else. Okay? And so that's what he's saying. Matthew chapter 7, beginning with verse 16, ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns and figs of thistles? Even so every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. So by their fruits ye shall know them. Thus, the tongue, speaking with a blessing and a cursing, is against nature. The true character is known. What is in your heart? All I got to do is listen to you for a while. And this verse in Matthew chapter 12, verses 36 and verse 37. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. That is, when you think about that passage, that ought to strike fear in every one of us.
Eric Owens posted today about people having racial,
Yes,
spitting out all this
racial stuff.
about their own race and
Yeah.
everything. And so we got to watch the social media stuff.
Yes,
Too.
and social media. That's what Judy's mentioning. We need to be careful what we write. Okay? We
It's
need
just
to
as
be,
permanent as
yeah. And really, yes. You know, we've got to be careful. Okay? Now, in verse number 13, who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. Okay? So the lesson goes from teachers and the use of tongue to all disciples. Word and works go together. James chapter 1, starting with verse 19. All right? Wherefore, my brethren, be ye, my beloved brethren, let every one of you be swift to hear and slow to speak and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So, and if any man be a hearer of the word and not a doer, is likened to a man beholding his natural face in the glass, for he both holdeth himself and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he is. But whosoever looketh into the perfect law of liberty and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this man shall be blessed in his deed. For if any man seem to be a religious, many among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his own tongue, he deceiveth his own heart, and this man's religion is vain. Pure religion and undefiled before the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in the affliction, and keep himself unspotted from the world. The way we keep ourselves unspotted by watching what we're saying. Okay. Luke chapter 6 and verse 46. Why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? So we go back to James, and he talks about the wise man then. The wise means a teacher. This has wisdom, knowledge, understanding that knowledge then. Here's one who is skilled, who is really a skilled teacher. Knowledge is the possession of facts. Wisdom is their proper application of facts. This wisdom is then demonstrated making proper application to his own life. Meekness is the absence of arrogance, pride, and desire for worldly acclaim. You know, Moses was the meekest man.
And you said it was opposite of what?
Absence of arrogance, pride, and the desire for worldly acclaim. I've heard it said that it is strength under control, and I believe that's true.
Grace under fire.
Okay. All right. We're going to stop right there this evening. And I want you to remember then, let's see. Is that the 23rd? Yes, 1/23.
Today.
All right, we're going to take up, and don't know, I think I'll give a test next week in here, your midterm, We need to do that. So probably won't have time to give much there. So we'll start with that and be ready for the test then next week. All right.
Adios.